Welcome to episode 45 of the Hipsters United podcast. My name is Chris, and joining me this week are Jill.
Hello.
And Andrew.
Hello.
Well, due to some computer issues and traveling, we weren't able to podcast for the last few weeks, so we missed out on talking about the Sky Saxon tribute concert that Billy took part in. And along with making guest appearances with the Electric Prunes and Yehovah 13, Billy Corgan also fronted a one-night-only supergroup called Spirits in the Sky, consisting of, I think I've got all the band members here, Mark Tulin, Kevin Dippold, Mark Weitz, Kerry Brown, and drummer of the future, Mike Byrne. Along with being Mike's first time playing out with Billy, this set was noteworthy, also in that we got to hear the first new original song in the post-Jimmy Chamberlin era. And it doesn't have a title yet, although Billy told a fan that its working title is Freak, and I played a little clip of it during the podcast intro that you just heard. But I wanted to get you guys' impressions of it, as well as your impressions on Mike Byrne's debut. A pretty common assessment of the song that I've seen is that it sounds very Zwanish, with one commenter making what I thought was an apt comparison to the Zwan song Rivers We Can't Cross. What did you think, Jill? Do you agree with that Zwanish comparison?
Having seen like dozens upon dozens of Zwan shows, I think that's a pretty solid comparison. It's something about like the sort of structured but meandering guitar solos and sort of upbeat major key chord, progressions. It's I don't know. It may just be something about... I guess it's hard for me to say it's specifically Zwan, though, because Corgan has always written these nice pop nuggets. And, I think that this is kind of the type of song that he writes when he's in that sort of peace, love, and all that other stuff mood. I don't know. Does that make sense? Is that
Sure.
a crazy thing to say? Like, I mean, there are songs that strike me as embracing that type of mood as well from earlier in their catalog. So it's just nice to hear something sort of upbeat. And regarding Mike Byrne, I think I told Jason my initial reaction to hearing him play was like, if I try really, really hard, I can kind of pretend that it's not Jimmy. I think he does a really good job at emulating Jimmy's style. I would be more interested in hearing his personal taste, though. Although we don't really know what Corgan's intentions are. He may just be trying to mold Byrne into, a more jazz-style rock drummer. I'm not sure. I think he was competent. I think it was, it was certainly a high-profile first gig for him to play, since lots of media was covering it, so...
Yeah, I think it'd be really foolish to actually try and judge Mike Byrne's drumming abilities just based on this one song. I mean,
right.
Everybody pretty much kind of screwed up at least once during this set, at least from what I could tell. So if he did, I know I saw some comments on hipstersunited.com that he missed some fills or something like that, and I profess no knowledge on drumming, so I know what a fill is, but I couldn't tell you whether he missed one or not. But it seems like Billy also screwed up at the beginning of that song on guitar, so I really can't pass a judgment on Mike Byrne just from that. Mm-hmm. I don't think he sounded like Jimmy, but then again, I don't think the song really called for him to sound like Jimmy.
Right.
Which, I don't know, maybe that will speak towards what Billy does end up going on and writing. I know we talked after Jimmy left, we talked about, well, how will this impact not only Billy's writing, but how Billy's writing is perceived? Will people say, oh, Jimmy Chamberlin's not here, now look at Billy writing these weenie songs that don't have heavy drums because, Jimmy's not there. I don't know if I'd call this a weenie song, but it's definitely not a drum-heavy power rock song. So...
Yeah, but if you look at Zwan, there were a lot of pretty easy listening, for lack of a better... there was not a lot of... a lot of those songs were just really straightforward pop songs. And I cannot begrudge Zwan that by any stretch of the imagination. So,
what did you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I thought... I liked the song the first time I heard it. I think the first time I heard it through that the original YouTube clip that got posted to hipstersunited.com, where the lyrics were basically lost in the mix, right from the camera and from where the person was recording it from.
Right.
And so that was sort of frustrating at first because Billy was talking about in the pre-banner lead up to this song, he was saying how he would never write lyrics like this before he met Sky, so it was a tribute to Sky in that way. And then the song started, and all I heard was that was a little frustrating, but
for all those kids at home, that's how it used to be.
when
We got that analog tape in the mail that was crap.
Yeah. Source for real audio.
So we got a much better recording available within a couple of days, which was great, and goes to show how many people were there watching and taking note of the show. I think you said that Freak was a working title, but there are already, 2 entertainment style blogs that already called out the song and said, start your, Billy's got his next big hit, and they're calling it Freak, so everyone will know the song is Freak. And people will be very confused if it becomes something, when it gets released, if it's a different title. So I think Billy might be stuck with that title. But, the other thing, I think, we touched on it, you guys already, but, I think there was a lot of messing up to go around in that song. I think Billy probably didn't go into the show intending to play it from the way that he talked about it before he started the song. I'm guessing that it's unclear exactly if this song is brand new or new in the past few months. And if it's new in the past few months, Mike was aware of it and maybe knew it. But the other 3 guys, or 2 guys, or Carrie might have had, depending on how much Carrie's been in the studio, might have known it. But the other 2 guys certainly probably had their first knowledge of the song was when they started doing rehearsals for the show. So
I
think it's not really fair to judge the musicianship on anybody's part for the song. It was a good loosey-goosey performance. Maybe not the most professional thing in the world, but it sounded good overall. Especially the first 2 minutes or so, especially sounded really good. And then it kind of towards the end, it sort of I think I think the mistakes are piling up and people are out of losing the beat and losing the phase and it's getting kind of messy. But I'm excited to hear that song the next time he shows up on stage. So whenever that might be. And Mike did hint that something might be happening pretty soon in one of his pre-Radio Silence posts to the internet. So we'll wait and see if anything comes out of it or anything comes around in the near future.
Yeah, it's interesting you were saying about you don't know when they made the decision to go with this song. According to Billy, they were originally planning on doing I believe another Electric Prunes song, but then the Electric Prunes let them know that they were going to be doing the song. So I imagine it was at some point during the rehearsals. But I mean, typically when you think of a Billy Corgan concert, he likes to practice everything over and over and over again and get it absolutely perfect. And
yeah.
He's very much a perfectionist, but this, I wonder if he was really in that mindset with this, since this concert was really just kind of like a fun time, a tribute to Sky Saxon. Everybody get out there and have some fun. It almost reminded me of the Star Children concert that we have on tape from June 18th, 1994.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that, Billy maybe wasn't as concerned as he usually was with everything being absolutely perfect.
I also think we're underestimating, or maybe we don't yet know the extent of how much Sky Saxon has influenced Billy. I think that there's more to that story than we even know. And from the initial sort of stories that Sabrina Saxon has told on HU, and from some of the things that we've been piecing together about how these sessions, like the original sessions, were put together during Superchrist, I think they spent a pretty considerable amount of time doing these sort of lay down of tracks that was really sort of fly by the seat of the pants and maybe a little bit less rigid than what we have come to expect out of Corgan. So, that might be with all of the change that's going on with Jimmy leaving and with, Sky passing and some of these other events happening, Corgan may be reevaluating some aspects of, how he wants to actually perform. I don't know. I think it's an interesting... It'll be an interesting thing to watch out for. See if we can see any sort of influence of Sky.
Yep.
So...
Well, in a conversation after the show with a writer for SmashingPumpkins.com, Billy made a comment that if James Iha were part of a 6-month tour last year, the band would have made an extra $5 million, but it would have been disastrous for the band members internally. And I don't know, I'm loath to dredge up the former band members discussion yet again, but the band did tour 3 times last year for a total of just a little bit less than 6 months. I mean, is Billy implying here that if James were simply up on stage with him, reviews would have been more positive for the tours, maybe, thus spurring ticket and merchandise sales? I mean, Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think what my first impression of his statement there was that perhaps the band there would have been more interest in terms of bigger shows or, arena level style shows would have been possible, or would have been in the financially doable had James been part of the mix. Just because then it could be billed as more of a reunion and not just, Smashing Pumpkins 2008 with 2 guys and 3 people who most people don't know. So I think I don't know if that was sort of the contracts they signed to do the concerts said, well, we'll give you this much, but if you can get James to come along, we'll throw in an extra $500,000 or what. But that was my impression. It was that Bill, if this reunion thing was truly about the money, then Billy and James would have swallowed their collective pride and shown up on stage and cashed the checks. And of course, like he said, it would have been a disaster because doing that, nothing good comes of that when you start just cashing the check rather than doing what's in your heart and what trying to put up a false front of happiness or pretending to get along on stage. Like sounds like probably would have been a sort of repeating the last stages of the Pumpkins in 2000 when, from what we can now reconstruct, that basically there was the Billy Jimmy faction and the James faction, and once they were off stage, they did not interact very often.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree that it could have been maybe, if James was there, it could have been billed as more of a reunion act, but why did James have to be involved? I mean, if Billy really was in it for the money, like so many people seem to think that he is, I mean, he could have done the reunion act himself, There was nothing stopping him and Jimmy from going up there and playing all the old hits and calling it a reunion, and I don't know. And I just can't imagine the tours with James, because I can't imagine James really being part of the new direction of the band, especially after his recent time in Tinted Windows.
Right. Well, and I think what's most important to consider is the context in which Billy was saying these comments. Like, I don't doubt that they could have made more money on tour if James had been a part of it, at least initially, because of the sort of added appeal that he would have brought. That sort of is a novelty factor, because what's James Iha been up to all these years? People are interested in finding out what the heck their heroes of yore have been up to and see them doing well for themselves now. That's why a lot of tours are successful reunion tours that really should never have happened. But if I'm not mistaken, the article on SmashingPumpkins.com had phrased it in context of Darcy's recent phone call.
Right.
And, I think that that's probably brought up all sorts of issues anew for Billy about, feeling like he has to continually defend himself and his decision to reform the band and continue playing songs that he used to, that were always his songs to begin with. It's like this constant reiteration of, well, I'm not in this for the money. How many times do I have to tell you that? And he's just using this as another teachable example about why he's, obviously not doing, he's obviously not doing the things that his critics are alleging he is. So, I don't know. I wouldn't take his comment so literally, because I think it's more echoing a sentiment that he is still frustrated about. So.
Yeah. I mean, if he is saying that, if part of his rationale for saying that is that there wouldn't have been as much criticism, because there was a significant amount of criticism that, they're reforming, but they only have half their original members, like, haha, it's not really the Smashing Pumpkins. If he's saying that, if he came back with James, there wouldn't have been that criticism. I would argue that, a lot of the arguments against Billy aren't entirely rational to begin with. So, if there's not that for them to talk about, there's always something. There are a lot of people that, criticized the band during the 20th anniversary tour for their tuneless droning. Even if James is up there on stage, I think they probably still would have said the same thing. It's like the crazy Obama birth certificate people that have been in the news lately saying, like, all you have to do is show me a birth certificate and then everything will be great. And, we've seen in the past those types of people, the conspiracy theory type people, they're never placated. Their agenda is set a certain way, and show them one piece of evidence and they'll find 4 more that they claim they don't have.
Well, and I think Billy's point is, so you put all of these puzzle pieces together, and then what? Then you have a band that's totally discontent and is going to break up. In this case, is it better for James to come back and join the band, and then the band to get so frustrated that he's gone 3 months later, 3 months into their 6-month tour, thereby self-fulfilling the prophecy of Billy Corgan being a crazy, overbearing, arrogant, band leader? It's the same crap, it's just phrased in a different way, and I'm starting to feel bad that, I've always felt bad, but it's just getting ridiculous that Corgan has to keep justifying himself over and over. And I think he did take this sort of Sky Saxon event as, again, a teachable moment where he could promote what Sky stood for, which was love and light and, the expansion of the Aquarius and the moon rising over... I don't know. I'm joking. So, if anything, he wants to embrace that sort of community and community of love and music. So,
if I try and imagine what it would have been like if James were there, it really does seem like just exactly what you were just saying, that, they maybe would have had the reunion tour for a few months, and they would have played all the old hits, and everyone would have been like, this is sweet. And then, Billy would have been not happy because he's not moving forward at all. So he would have wanted to go on and do something new. And, they would have started the same arguments that they always had as a band back in the 90s, where, when it came time to go in the studio and do something new, they would have reverted back to the same personality conflicts and the same problems that they always had. So, yeah, I don't see, just exactly like Billy said, they maybe would have made a few extra $1 million for those first few months, and then that would have been it. And I don't know, maybe there's some people that would have been happier that way, but I'm not.
Yeah, me neither. I'm not one of them. I'd rather see them producing, new music. That's what it's all about to me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, finally, Jason made a post this week about how fans and reviewers alike seem to kind of adhere to the notion that Zeitgeist has 1 or 2 good songs, but those songs vary from person to person. And this post drew a ton of comments. I think there were about 65 or 66 last I looked. And those comments seem to bear out his statement. But I was wondering if you guys think this phenomenon is somehow unique to Zeitgeist, or at least more pronounced with Zeitgeist than with other Smashing Pumpkins albums, or is this true with any album?
I think it's true with every album. Ever since I began following the Smashing Pumpkins, this has always been an issue of, oh my gosh, my favorite song is X. Why would you ever like song Y? Song X is so clearly the best. Like, it's just, I think that's a pretty solid symbol of, hey, by the way, the whole band makes really good music, and a lot of it, and they're really competent, and, different songs emotionally resonate with different people. So I think that, I don't know that it's a phenomenon of Zeitgeist specifically. So
I think one point, though, may be that with Zeitgeist, it seemed like it was a criticism of the album. Like, oh, well, there's only one or two good songs on it. I think what Jason is saying is right in that for everyone, those one or two songs are different, but I think people are kind of using that as a criticism of Zeitgeist itself, which, I don't know, like, when I think back to Siamese Dream, I think that there may be more of a consensus on which are the great songs on Siamese Dream and which are the songs that aren't as strong. I don't think that many people could have said, oh, Sweet Sweet is clearly the best song on Siamese Dream. Whereas with Zeitgeist, from this string of comments that we saw, I mean, I saw everything from, Tarantula to Pomp and Circumstances.
Yeah, I think every song got, every song got mentioned at least once for favorite. I think the closest album that you can compare to Zeitgeist in terms of the Pumpkins catalog is probably Back to Gish, and partly because I think for a Smashing Pumpkins album, Zeitgeist was fairly short. I mean, Billy didn't write it wasn't a double album, and it wasn't
it wasn't 73 minutes and 59 seconds.
Yeah, he didn't fill out the available space in the CD at all. It was 45 minutes or so, I think. So you go back to the album, sort of the weight of the album, and you go back to compare it to is Gish, and I think you'd get a lot of, except for maybe a couple songs. I think if Jason had made the same post about Gish, and somehow that also gotten 55 responses, I think every song on Gish would have gotten called out, except maybe Daydream. But there'll be the Darcy fans out there who say they love Daydream, maybe. But I think that's I think another sort of factor is that because it wasn't such, he didn't write an extremely lengthy album, people had to find something else to write about, and so it wasn't the grand story of Melancholy or all the drama of Adore or the concept album of Machina. So, we got to talk about something. So let's say, okay, it's got one good song, and the rest are kind of average. And then you write about the fact that the band is reforming, and there's your review.
Well, I also wonder if it's not a symptom. So I think there are two different issues here at play. One is that people having different opinions about songs that their favorite band writes and puts out on albums, they're always going to have differing opinions. Like, I think that's what I was talking about earlier, how this is not a novel concept or a novel issue with this particular album. But what Andrew started to allude there to regarding the critical reviews is I do think that there was this, predisposition of critics to be hesitant to wholeheartedly come out and embrace a band that they knew was going to get a lot of public criticism from the indie rock darlings for coming back out. So I think everyone knew ahead of time. We were hesitant, even before starting HU. Maybe not hesitant, but we were wary going into starting HU that, oh gosh, we're just going to be like up against the big indie media. They're going to be like, Smashing Pumpkins are back, it's just a cash grab, oh my gosh, Billy Corgan is still such an egomaniacal, crazy person. Like, but at the same time, there's still this nostalgia associated with the band because, hey, they're good, and they had a lot of hits, and they did a lot of really impressive things for a long time. So I think it's like a hedged bet that the reviewers were making to say, oh, well, blah, 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 same old regurgitated story of how the band got back together from the Chicago advertisement in the paper. I want my band back, blah, blah, blah. The release of the album was so much about the backstory that when they finally got around to reviewing the music, which in some cases was, it constituted an eighth of the review as opposed to 7/8 like backstory, they got around to reviewing the songs on it and said, oh, well, these couple of songs are good, and just sort of dismissed the rest. Because I don't think anyone wanted to come out and say, Smashing Pumpkins' new album is amazing. They didn't want to put all their eggs in one basket because that's just so uncouth. That's just so. That's so what a noob would do.
They would have gotten their. They would have lost their indie card. Their indie cred.
Yeah, and I think it's also further complicated. I agree. I totally agree, Andrew. So sue me. But I also think it's a factor of the fact that so many album reviews that I've read over the past few years have this sort of, it seems that there's this pressure for reviews to have a very specific directive to an audience. Even if it's a really poorly reviewed record, I still see pretty often nuggets within reviews saying, oh, but this song or this song is really good, put it on your iPod. It's like this sense of taste making, well, these songs are great, put them on your iPod, the rest of it's trash. So there's this sort of inherent pressure on the critics to, I guess it's really trying to curate singles collections almost for their readers, and it's a bizarre pressure, but I think it still existed for the Pumpkins because they are a notoriously huge mid-90s act, clearly still interested in making new music. So which side of the coin do you fall on? Do you fall on the totally uncool, they're back and they're amazing, or they're back and they have a couple songs, the rest of it, whatever.
Well, and I wondered, Billy's talked about the singles culture where now people only care about the one song they hear on the radio. And I wonder if that's kind of spilling over into reviews also, where instead of reviewing an album as an album, it's reviewed as individual songs.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Look at Pitchfork. Have you ever read, their single reviews? They review everything that comes out of, especially the newest, hip-hop singles. Because they're so mash-upable. They're all those closet DJs using their iGarage band, whatever. I don't even know. I'm totally not cool. Pro Tools. They're using Pro Tools to mash shit up. But
yeah.
It's totally. It's you got to check out this new hot single by Lil Wayne. Yeah, it's just. I think there's a huge amount of pressure on reviewing, publications that review music to curate singles on behalf of their readers so that people don't have to spend time reading or listening to whole albums. They can just be like, oh, sweet, it's a 30-minute or a 30-second song. 3-minute. Try that one again, Jill. It's a 3-minute song that totally, will make me look cool in front of all of my friends. So.
Yeah, sadly, I really do. I think it's just a signal of what's happened. I can't really blame them too much for reviewing them as songs because that's how people can consume them. There was no option before. You either bought the single or you bought the album, and you didn't want to buy the album unless when you were reading reviews, you wanted a review of the whole album because that's how you decided if you wanted to spend $13 or $14 on that album. People really do have a choice now. They can, just buy the one or two songs that reviews say are good. The reviewers almost have more power now.
I agree. And it's a scary, it's a scary thing to an artist to get reviewed for that, because either you make a whole record that, appeals to a certain aesthetic that is going to get good press, or you just sort of have to be willing to accept this disjointed review of your work and people sort of cherry picking it.
And it's very dangerous to release a diverse album also, because that just makes it easier for people to say, well, I like song A and song B, but I didn't like the rest of it because it sounded different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's absolutely correct.
And I think Zeitgeist can fall into that category. I mean, Pomp and Circumstances sounds absolutely the opposite of Tarantula.
Or United States.
Right.
So, and I think that that's why you're getting this disjointed sense of, critics telling you what songs they think are perfectly acceptable, and they're totally different from each other. They're just totally different. So I'm not in any way surprised, and it was always really amusing when Jason or I would find new album reviews back when Zeitgeist had just come out, because we just saw this. It was all over the map. It's like, we would play Guess That Song. What is the New York Times going to say is good? What is Pitchfork going to say is good? What's Stereo Gum going to say is good? They're all different, so there's no reason that you could be able to guess. So, and I also, in my head, I keep sounding more and more bitter about this, and I don't necessarily intend to be bitter. I think that it's partially due to the fact that there's just so much music to review that a lot of publications are trying to overextend themselves and try to figure out, can I review everything that's out there, or can I review even half of it? And so, they're trying to educate their readers to some extent on their expertise, but also on, what is their opinion on what their readers should have in their collection to be like-minded and well-educated in music or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of the danger of this whole long-tail culture, where we have so much choice just about everything. I mean, about TV and movies and music, that you're right. I mean, it's hard for any one publication to review every piece of music that comes out that's, worthy of being reviewed. So you end up with kind of niche publications reviewing that genre or that particular niche of music, and then it's hard for people to kind of branch out and listen to different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's totally true. And until the sort of sea change of music reviews shifts in any way, I think we're kind of stuck with this formula. I don't necessarily see anyone else doing it differently, unless you're talking about people like us who are doing things in super in-depth coverage. And who the heck wants to read us on a regular basis if you don't like the Smashing Pumpkins?
Right.
I mean, I say that semi-ironically, but I'm not trolling around on Pearl Jam blogs. And that's really like one of the only other blogs I know of that's out there that does stuff as in-depth as we do. So,
right. If you want in-depth information, you have to go to kind of the fans to get it, and then you're getting a necessarily biased view of it, because obviously these people care enough to look at it in depth. They are fans.
Right.
Yeah.
It's exhausting to keep up with everything. It really is. That's why they have staffs, entire staff teams of writers at these places to cover, 50 albums a week.
Yeah. The internet's pretty big, but it's not quite big enough yet.
Yeah, that's true. And I think I think also what Andrew just hit on is very apropos for this particular issue too, wherein we saw so many reviews that kind of looked like they were regurgitated from each other. Like, I think Jason even called someone out one time, some author, we might have even posted it, that was like verbatim, word for word, 3-paragraph, upfront backstory about the band before the album review. Like, it was not from us, but it was, we'd seen one review from one publication and read pretty much the same exact review from someone else up until, the last paragraph where they just suggested another couple of songs that were the best ones. So I think that there is this, like, big circle jerk of media, quote-unquote, professionals that are heavily borrowing against each other and seeing this sort of formulaic response to, oh, well, this new album is out, this is how I should write about it because I don't know how to, and someone else did it this way. I mean, it was really atrocious in some cases where we saw, like, this plagiarism. But there is this, and back to what Andrew was saying, there is this pressure to cover the band because it's, somewhat relevant according to the news cycle of the day that they were reuniting or reforming or however you wanted to talk about it. So if they saw these reviews circulating telling the backstory and then making these sort of single recommendations, it's not surprising that everyone else wanted to sort of inject their own opinion into what was really the best, because I'm the music critic and I should know what's best.
Yeah.
for you and your pathetic ears.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about, sort of the music criticism is sort of its own little subculture. And, people who write for Pitchfork and people who write for the other music blogs, which have the Pitchfork like indie cred, they have their own little world that they're writing for, and writing to continue to prove that they are good enough to continue to be part of this little subculture. And if you read a lot of political blogs, people write the same stuff about people who cover politics in Washington. They call it's called a village mentality, where all the opinion makers who you see in the back page, in the opinion pages, all sort of, they're not writing to, when they write their editorials, they're not writing to the common people. They're writing to each other. They're writing to their own little group.
Right.
And we happen to be, the fact that, the public at large is reading their work is sort of immaterial to them. It's all about keeping their position in the food chain and in the hierarchy of who's the smartest, who's the most respected amongst each other. And that's, other than it's not so much the stories they're writing, it's the scorecard of how what kind of respect they've got amongst the little subculture that they've got. So that's sort of
true.
Yeah, that's sort of a human nature sort of thing that it's important to call it out every once in a while, but it's not really much you can do about it. It's sort of how we behave as humans, I guess.
Well, and I was just looking back through some of Jason's old posts, and he did this meticulously crafted series on every single track on Zeitgeist, just to try and see if he could find a consensus among reviewers on, what people thought. And it was pretty interesting because he compiled, a variety of sources from different, I guess, media genres. So it wasn't exclusively indie rock media. It was, some mainstream style media and so forth. And one of the things that still sticks with me, and I remember reading and just, being sort of floored by it, because we're lucky to have Jason as our brilliant blogger. We can talk about him when he's not here. He says, this is on July 21st, 2007, so this is a little over 2 years ago now. He says, this is in regards to his post about United States. He had compiled all of the reviews of United States. And he said, and I quote, "There are two big lessons I'm trying to teach with these 12 posts. One, Zeitgeist has received mixed reviews, as has every Billy Corgan album upon its release, not decidedly negative reviews. And number two, there is not even a consensus among those who like or dislike it as to what exactly is good or bad about it. My Exhibit A in support of Big Lesson number 2 is this set of reviewer comments on United States. My sense is that many a self-loathing Pumpkins fan has the impression that, even if some critics like some things about Zeitgeist, surely they all dislike United States because, it's long, dude, and only loser Pumpkins fans like myself can enjoy that. But the truth is, just like every song on Zeitgeist, save for the generically acceptable "that's the way," United States has numerous supporters and detractors. Have a look. And he goes on to talk about all of, the different individual quotes, but I think, it rings true of the entire album in general, because you have to interject this sort of critical, self-awareness that these sort of, these critics, for lack of a better word, half of which are just sort of straight out of college, status-seeking hacks, they're all going to try and sort of find their own perspective on the Pumpkins albums if they're reviewing them that may not actually be representative of how they felt of the album as a whole. And by that I mean, since there's so much critical work being done, or so many reviews being posted, the only thing that a lot of these critics would have actually posted about were songs that they had a very strong reaction to initially, because they didn't have a lot of time to perhaps dig really deep into the album, because they're doing, dozens of album reviews as part of their jobs.
And it's the internet. You have to get it out right away as soon as you
Exactly.
can, so that you're first.
Exactly.
Or so that you don't miss the wave.
And I don't know about you guys, but that's totally not how I consume my music. Like, it's really difficult for me to go through and listen to an album and be able to make a snap judgment on it right away.
Right.
Like, it takes me many, many, many listens before I can even sort of condense what I feel. And maybe I'm obviously not a quote-unquote music professional that reviews things for a living, but I guess my opinions are more reserved than what I see in the music media.
And, I mean, as music, it seems like it's something that it doesn't have to get reviewed right away. It's not like a movie where people have a certain amount of time in which they can consume it, The movie comes out, and then about a month later, if the movie is okay, I mean, if the movie's bad, it's in the theater for like a week or two. If it's good, it's in the movie theater for, depending on the season, probably a month and a half or 2 months or longer. But on average, it's probably about a month if it's a crowded season. So there's a limited time in which people can consume it. So you feel, I mean, if you take 3 weeks to get your review out, there's a chance that no one will care. Everyone's either seen the movie, or they've already made their decision, or they can't see the movie because it's out of theaters. With music, it's not that way at all. It's not like when a record gets released, I have only 2 weeks in order to buy this record. If I don't buy it in those 2 weeks, I'm just not going to buy it. That's not true. Once the record is out, usually most bands don't release another record for another at least year and a half or 2 years.
Right.
So I don't understand why there doesn't need to be a rush. You could take your time and really you could listen to the album multiple times and have a well thought out review. But like you said, I think a lot of it also is just the volume that they have to sift through. You can't spend a lot of time listening to the Smashing Pumpkins album and really crafting a well thought out review after multiple listens, because you've got the Animal Collective and all these other albums you've got to review also.
Yeah.
You mean the new Tinted Windows album? Because that would have been true Pumpkins. Sorry. Whatever.
Well, thanks for joining us this week. Our song of the week is one of the oft-forgotten songs from Zeitgeist, Pomp and Circumstances, from New Orleans on October 27th, 2007. Good night, everybody.
When I was afraid I was, now that I'm learned to come between the rest and the strange sickness and invite again. So broken and framed, a down face. Sunshine and grace, the one we stay for a while. I can feel it still. I can hold you so for a while. sprays them round. And as they go, we can say we know, or we do we know. But what sunshine and grace down we face, what's better down, broken and vain, down we face, what sunshine and grace, won't we stay? Cause I will tell that soul that I'm mad as hell. Down, broken and vain. I'm down, broken and vain. I'm cool, but I'm changed.
The Hipsters United podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Smashing Pumpkins, Virgin Records, or Warner Brothers Reprise Records. All opinions offered by panelists or guests of the Hipsters United podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of the Smashing Pumpkins. All audio during the show is licensed for non-profit use per the terms and conditions on the Live Music Archive at archive.org. Intro music is from the Machina 2 album released for free download on the internet by the Smashing Pumpkins in September of 2000.